Hello students, today we will take up the second chapter from your textbook Flamingo. The title of the chapter is Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. Let us read about the author. Anees Jung was born in Rourkela and spent her childhood and adolescence in Hyderabad. She received her education in Hyderabad and in the United States of America. Her parents were both writers. Anees Jung began her career as a writer in India. She has been an editor and columnist for major newspapers in India and abroad, and has authored several books. The following is an excerpt from her book titled Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. Now, before beginning the reading of the chapter, I will give you a quick introduction of the chapter. Lost Spring, as we all already read, that it is an extract from Anees Jung's book Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. So in this excerpt, Anees expresses her concern about the exploitation of children in dangerous jobs like bangle making and rag picking. Anees also argues that abject poverty and thoughtless traditions result in the loss of innocence and much needed freedom and education during childhood. Now, what is the result of all this? The result is backbreaking work, dismal living conditions, submission to exploitation, and acceptance of poverty as destiny. So there is a dire need to provide these poverty-stricken people, particularly children, a life of dignity and opportunities to dare, dream, and act freely. Let us now begin reading the chapter. Why do you do this? I ask Sahib, whom I encounter every morning scrounging for gold in the garbage dumps of my neighborhood. Sahib left his home long ago. Set amidst the green fields of Dhaka, his home is not even a distant memory. There were many storms that swept away their fields and homes. His mother tells him. That's why they left, looking for gold in the big city where he now lives. Okay, so the chapter begins like this, that every morning the writer sees a young rag picker boy named Sahib, and this boy visits the garbage dump near her house and searches for gold in it. Okay. Now the writer says that he searches for gold ironically because although the garbage dump is full of useless thrown away things, still he shuffles it so minutely as if he will get something as precious as gold from it. Now the boy's name, as we all know, is Sahib. We get to know about his home, that his home was in Dhaka in the middle of lush green fields. So they left Dhaka many years ago and he does not remember it anymore. Okay, about his home he doesn't remember because he left that place years ago. Now the mother tells him, his mother had told him that there were many storms which destroyed their house and fields. Okay, therefore they shifted to this place where they are living currently. So they were here in the cities in order to search gold out of all the garbage. Okay, now the writer again says, looking for gold in the big city. So gold here refers to something very precious which was not available in their hometown. Therefore they had shifted here in the big cities. So things like, what are the things that are not found there in the village or in the previous place where they used to live? things like shoes, money bags, etc., for the children, and food, clothing, shelter as means of survival for their parents. So the boy searches for such precious things in the garbage dumps, and one day the writer questions Sahib and asks him the reason for shuffling through the garbage. Okay, let us read further. I have nothing else to do, he mutters, looking away. Go to school, I say glibly, realizing immediately how hollow the advice must sound. There is no school in my neighborhood. When they build one, I will go. If I start a school, will you come? I ask, half joking. Yes, he says, smiling broadly. A few days later, I see him running up to me. Is your school ready? It takes longer to build a school, I say, embarrassed at having made a promise that was not meant. But promises like mine abound in every corner of his bleak world. So, when the writer questions Sahib and asks him the reason for hunting through the garbage every day, then Sahib replies to the writer that he has nothing else to do other than rag picking. Now, the writer suggests to Sahib that he must go to a school. He should go to a school. I say glibly, she said. Okay, she says, I say glibly. Now, glibly means when a person speaks with confidence without giving a careful thought to what he or she is saying. So, after suggesting to Sahib that he must go to a school, the author immediately realizes that her advice is meaningless for a poor boy like Sahib. Now, further, Sahib replies to the author that there are no schools in the area where he lives, and he also assures her that he will go to school when one is built near his house. Now, then the writer asks him jokingly that if she opened a school, then would he attend it? To which Sahib replies, he gives a wide smile and says that he would surely join the writer's school. Now, after a few days, Sahib runs up to the writer to ask whether her school is ready or not. To which the writer replies that it takes a lot of time to build a school. Now, at this moment, the writer felt ashamed and embarrassed. Why? Because she had made false promises to the poor boy Sahib. Because she had said that she would open a school, but she had said this just as a joke. Okay, she says so. And she had never actually intended to open a school. So, she felt embarrassed. She felt ashamed of herself for giving false hopes to Sahib. Now, further she says, but promises like mine abound in every corner of his bleak world. So, abound means something which exists in large numbers, and bleak means empty world. So, by saying this, she is telling this to the readers that Sahib was used to such false promises, as these false promises existed in large numbers in his empty world. And also, Sahib was surrounded by such false promises made by everyone around him, and his world was a gloomy and empty one. Okay, where nobody cared to fulfill his wishes or his needs or his dreams. After months of knowing him, I ask him his name. Sahib-e-Alam, he announces. He does not know what it means. If he knew its meaning, Lord of the universe, he would have a hard time believing it. Unaware of what his name represents, he roams the streets with his friends, an army of barefoot boys who appear like the morning birds and disappear at noon. Over the months, I have come to recognize each of them. So in this paragraph, the writer says that she had known Sahib for a few months when she asked him his name, and he replied as if he was making an announcement of his own name, that his name was Sahib-e-Alam. Now the writer thought that the boy did not know the meaning of his name, and if he came to know that his name meant Lord of the Universe, then he would not be able to believe it. Okay, it's written he would have a hard time believing it, so he would not be able to believe that his name's meaning is Lord of the Universe. Okay, because he was in a reality in a very poor state, which a lord could never be in. So his name was opposite to the standard of life that he was living. Now he went around the streets. It is told that he used to go around the streets with a group of friends, and they were all barefoot army of boys, it is said, who did not wear any footwear. And all these boys appeared in the morning like the morning birds and disappeared at noon. And the writer could recognize all of these boys as she had been seeing them for the past few months. Let's read further. Why aren't you wearing chappals? I ask one. My mother did not bring them down from the shelf, he answers simply. So the writer asked one of these boys that why was he not wearing any footwear. Now the boy simply replied to the writer, that his mother did not get them down from the shelf, therefore he was not wearing the slippers, the chappals. Further, even if she did, he will throw them off, adds another, who is wearing shoes that do not match. When I comment on it, he shuffles his feet and says nothing. I want shoes, says a third boy, who has never owned a pair all his life. Traveling across the country, I have seen children walking barefoot in cities on village roads. It is not lack of money but a tradition to stay barefoot is one explanation. I wonder if this is only an excuse to explain away a perpetual state of poverty. Okay, so here there is this another boy who was wearing a different shoe. Both the shoes that he was wearing were not matching with each other. So he was wearing a different shoe in each foot. He said that even if the boy's mother would have given him the footwear from the shelf, he would not have worn them, he would have thrown it away. Now by saying this, he meant that the boy was not wearing footwear because he did not want to wear one. He didn't wanted to wear one. So the writer asked the second boy the reason for wearing a different shoe in each foot. Now he did not reply and he just shuffled his feet as he tried to hide the shoes. Okay, so he didn't actually reply to the writer's question. Now there was a third boy who spoke that he was eager to get a pair of shoes as he had never owned any pair of shoes all his life. Okay, never in his life had he had a pair of shoe. So the writer takes the example of shoes to highlight the condition of these boys, to highlight the poor state in which these little boys are living in. So she says that they search for the garbage dumps. Okay, they look into that garbage to find some precious things for themselves. And she further tells us that as she travelled across the country, she had seen many children walking barefoot in the cities as well as villages. So these children say that it was not because of the lack of money that they were not buying shoes for themselves or they were staying barefoot. Rather, they say that it was a tradition to be followed to stay barefoot. So here it is said it is not lack of money but a tradition to stay barefoot is one explanation. So staying barefoot was a tradition for them. Okay, this is the reason which they give for staying barefoot. Further, I wonder if this is only an excuse to explain away a perpetual state of poverty. Perpetual state of poverty here means the poverty, the never ending condition of being poor. Okay, so here the writer wondered, and she concluded that the reason of it being a tradition of not wearing the shoes or of being barefoot, it was a tradition maybe because this was just an excuse for them to hide the fact that they were so poor that they could not afford footwears for themselves. Let's read ahead. I remember a story a man from Udupi once told me. As a young boy, he would go to school past an old temple where his father was a priest. He would stop briefly at the temple and pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, I visited his town and the temple, which was now drowned in an air of desolation. In the backyard, where lived the new priest, there were red and white plastic chairs. A young boy dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrived panting and threw his school bag on a folding bed. Looking at the boy, I remembered the prayer another boy had made to the goddess when he had finally got a pair of shoes. Let me never lose them. The goddess had granted his prayer. Young boys like the son of the priest now wore shoes, but many others like the rag pickers in my neighborhood remain shoeless. So here the writer narrates a story told to her by a man from Udupi. Udupi is a town in Karnataka. So when he was a young boy, this is the story that the man narrated to the writer, that when he was a young boy, he would walk to his school, and on the way he would cross a temple where his father worked as a priest. Now what would he do? He would stop at the temple and pray to God to bless him with a pair of shoes. And then further, after 30 years, when the writer visited the town and the temple, he describes the place that now at that moment, at that time, the place was nearly empty. And there was this new priest who lived in the backyard of the temple. There were also plastic chairs in red and white color. They were kept over there. Now, a young boy came running, and he was wearing this grey colored school uniform, socks and shoes, and he had a school bag hung on his shoulders. So he threw it on the bed and ran away. Now the writer wants to say that the financial position of the priest at the temple had improved over the last 30 years as it was before. This condition of this current priest had improved. Now because he could now afford shoes for his children, and she was reminded of this another boy who got a pair of shoes. He prayed to the goddess that he may never lose the shoes that he had got. Okay, so in the earlier times, in the older times, the children used to pray to the god in order to get a pair of shoes, and also they used to pray, once they got the shoes, they used to pray that they may never lose their shoes. Whereas in the current time, the kids were having all the basic needs also, particularly the shoe, the bags, the uniform and everything. This is how he compared. The writer here is trying to compare the condition of the priest earlier, of the children earlier, and the priest and children in the current time. Now the goddess, then it is told that after the child prayed that he may never lose his shoes, the goddess had granted his prayer, as the boy never lost his footwear. Now this shows us that the underprivileged value anything that they get. The people who don't have things available to them, they value things when they get it. So towards the end of the paragraph, the writer says that the young boys like that of the priest wore shoes now, But there were still many rag pickers in her neighborhood who remained without shoes, who still were not capable enough to buy shoes for themselves. Let us read ahead. My acquaintance with the barefoot rag pickers leads me to Simapuri, a place on the periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it, metaphorically. Those who live here are squatters who came from Bangladesh back in 1971. Sahib's family is among them. Simapuri was then a wilderness. It still is, but it is no longer empty. In structures of mud with roofs of tin and tarpaulin, devoid of sewage, drainage, or running water, live 10,000 rag pickers. So the writer here describes the area where these rag pickers live. She tells about Simapuri, which is located on the periphery of Delhi, outskirts of Delhi. She says Simapuri, a place on a periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it, metaphorically. So why she says so? See, Delhi as a city and the capital of the country had all the facilities and privileges to offer to its residents. However, Simapuri, though nearby Delhi only, it did not have even basic facilities like drainage, sewage systems, and running water. Thus, it seemed miles away from Delhi. Though being a part of Delhi, but still it seemed miles away from Delhi. Okay. Now, then the writer further says that in 1971, when these rag pickers had migrated from Bangladesh, the area had been a wilderness, a wasteland, and she says that Simapuri was still a wasteland, but now it was not empty, as almost 10,000 rag pickers lived there in structures made of wood with roofs made of thin sheets of tin or plastic material called tarpaulin. Okay, so then further we come to know about the pathetic condition of these poor people, the rag pickers. That what is their condition? That there was no sewage, drainage or running water facility in Simapuri, and they lived in very unhygienic conditions. Also, Simapuri was totally a piece of wasteland where the garbage of the city was collected. On top of all the facilities which they were not given, on top of it, all the garbage of the city was collected in Simapuri only. So all these poor people like Sahib had started living illegally in Simapuri. Okay. Let us read ahead. They have lived here for more than 30 years without an identity, without permits, but with ration cards that get their names on voters' lists and enable them to buy grain. Food is more important for survival than an identity. So this is very important. Please underline if you have your books. Let's continue. Food is more important for survival than an identity. If at the end of the day we can feed our families and go to bed without an aching stomach, we would rather live here than in the fields that gave us no grain, say a group of women in tattered saris when I asked them why they left their beautiful land of green fields and rivers. So the rag pickers had been living illegally in Simapuri. Okay. For the last 30 years. It had been 30 years that they had been living here in Simapuri illegally, in an unofficial manner. So they had occupied the area without government permission or any kind of official ownership, but the politicians of the area provided them with ration cards and voter identity cards, because of which, through which, with the help of these ration cards, they could get the groceries, daily groceries for their family. But in return, in return to these ration cards, they casted their votes in favor of the politicians who had helped them at that time. Okay. Now, the writer asked a group of women who were wearing tattered saris, means torn saris, that why did they leave their beautiful land of green fields and rivers? Why did they leave their homes in Dhaka? So, to this, these women replied to the writer that if they were able to satisfy the hunger of their families and were able to sleep well at night without an empty, aching stomach, then they were happier to live in Simapuri than their fields in Dhaka, which were ruined and which gave no food to them. Okay. Let's read further. Wherever they find food, they pitch their tents that become transit homes. Children grow up in them, becoming partners in survival. And survival in Simapuri means rag picking. Through the years, it has acquired the proportions of a fine art. Garbage to them is gold. It is their daily bread, a roof over their heads, even if it is a leaking roof. But for a child, it is even more. So these people traveled in search of food, and wherever they found food, they used to set up their temporary homes over there only, and they started living there at that place. Now their children kept on growing gradually in those tents, temporary houses which were built by them, which were put up by them. So these children also started helping their parents in seeking different means of survival. But for those who lived in Simapuri, the means of survival was only rag picking. Now, as they had been doing it for many years, they became trained at rag picking, and they did pretty well. So, for the rag pickers, the garbage was a precious thing, as precious as gold. And these families searched the garbage dumps and got things which they sold to fund their food. Okay, in that garbage only, they used to find various things which they used to sell and then earn money out of it. So they gathered torn or damaged sheets which were used to cover the roof of their homes. Now these did not cover the roofs well, but still it kind of provided them with some protection from leakage, okay, whenever it rained, or maybe other problems which they faced. So these covers provided them a bit of more protection. Now for the children, these garbage dumps were more than a means of survival. Okay. Now in this paragraph, the author describes children of slums as partners in survival. Now the author describes the children of slums as partners in survival because their situation, the situation of these children compels them to take up petty and menial work at an early age in order to keep themselves alive, and also to share the burden of their parents, okay, the burden of poverty. Let's read further. I sometimes find a rupee, even a 10 rupee note. Sahib says, his eyes lighting up. When you can find a silver coin in a heap of garbage, you don't stop scrounging, for there is hope of finding more. It seems that for children, garbage has a meaning different from what it means to their parents. For the children, it is wrapped in wonder. For the elders, it is a means of survival. Now again, this is a very important paragraph. So here we come to know that Sahib was very happy to say that sometimes he found a rupee and even a 10 rupee note in the dump, in the garbage. And as he says that as one finds even a silver coin in the garbage dump, then he kept on searching, hoping to find more. So if one is able to find one coin, even one silver coin, then for the next time also he has this wish to get more coins, and for that he searches more in that garbage. Now further, the writer says that for the children, the garbage dump was a means of fulfilling their dreams, although partially. Whereas for their parents, it was a means of aiding survival by providing the basic needs such as food, clothing and shelter. So both the children and the parents had different perspective. Okay, let's read further. One winter morning, I see Sahib standing by the fenced gate of the neighborhood club, watching two young men dressed in white, playing tennis. I like the game, he hums, content to watch it standing behind the fence. I go inside when no one is around, he admits. The gatekeeper lets me use the swing. So here we get to know that about one winter morning, the writer saw Sahib standing by the fence of a club, and he was watching a tennis game being played by two young men who were dressed in white. So he told the writer that he liked the game of tennis, and he admits that he went inside the club when no one else was around, when no one else was there. Also, he discloses this, that he was allowed to take the swings with the permission of the guard over there, with the permission of the gatekeeper. Further, Sahib too is wearing tennis shoes that look strange over his discolored shirt and shorts. Someone gave them to me, he says in the manner of an explanation. The fact that they are discarded shoes of some rich boy who perhaps refused to wear them because of a hole in one of them does not bother him. For one who has walked barefoot, even shoes with a hole is a dream come true. But the game he is watching so intently is out of his reach. So the writer saw that Sahib was also wearing tennis shoes who were not matching. They were inappropriate, and they were not also going with his dress which he had worn. The condition of these shoes was worn out and they had faded. So Sahib told the writer in an attempt to justify, to explain himself, that someone gave him the shoes. Now the writer, however, figured out that he had got them from a garbage dump, and they must have been thrown away by a rich boy belonging to a rich family, as he did not want to wear them anymore. Probably they had a hole or two in them, due to which he did not want to wear them. So they were discarded shoes. Now on the contrary, Sahib was not bothered by the holes in that shoe, and he had no problem wearing them, as he could not afford anything better than that, as he had walked barefoot for a long period of time, and to wear a shoe even with a hole was like a dream come true for him. Now, although due to the garbage dump, Sahib's dream of wearing shoes had been partially fulfilled, as he got to wear shoes, which he never did up till now. But his desire to play tennis would never be fulfilled. Why? Because Sahib belongs to a very poor family where they get no opportunities. Okay. And the game of tennis was earned only by the rich lot. So his getting to play that game, his chance of getting to play that game was almost zero. This morning, Sahib is on his way to the milk booth. In his hand is a steel canister. I now work in a tea stall down the road, he says, pointing in the distance. I am paid 800 rupees and all my meals. Does he like the job? I ask. His face, I see, has lost the carefree look. The steel canister seems heavier than the plastic bag he would carry so lightly over his shoulder. The bag was his. The canister belongs to the man who owns the tea shop. Sahib is no longer his own master. Now again, this one is a very, very important paragraph. So one morning, the writer met Sahib, who was on his way to the milk booth, and he was holding a steel container in his hand. And he tells this to the writer that he had got a job at the nearby tea stall, and he was earning 800 rupees over there per month. And also over it, he gets his meals too for free. Now the writer asked him if he liked the job, as she could see that he had lost the carefree look that he had in on his face earlier. Now Sahib was working for someone else and was carrying his master's container, so he was burdened with the responsibility given up by someone else. But earlier, as a rag picker, when he had this bag over his shoulder, he would carry his own bag over his shoulder. At that point of time, he was his own master. He didn't had to follow anyone's instructions, which he had to currently follow as he was working at the milk booth. Now he was no longer his own master. So see, Sahib took up a job with a tea stall, and he gave up his rag picking profession. Now this change brought him an assured monthly income though, but this monthly income he earned was at the cost of his own freedom. He lost his freedom as he had to follow the instructions of someone else now. And his own light polythene bag, which he used to carry over his shoulders, that polythene bag, was replaced by someone else's heavy steel milk canister. Besides, the carefree phase of his life also came to an end with this new profession that he chose. Okay, so this is it about this part of the chapter. Reread the passages again very carefully, mark the difficult words, and keep up your doubts for the next session. Thank you, everyone.